Hello there, and welcome to another video of me rambling about things I'm likely not qualified to talk about. Today, I'd like to talk about what I think makes a game's arsenal great. Now, while most of the time arsenal refers to guns, I'd like to stress that it also applies to the general tools that you have at your disposal. The equipment, the consumables, abilities, movesets, everything that your player has to interact with the game. And to get my points across easily in this video, I'm going to be looking at the subject from three perspectives: the concept, the interactions, and the presentation. Of course, not every single item in the game needs to fulfill all three of these. These are just general guidelines that I've devised myself by analyzing games whose arsenals I find to be great. With that said, let's get started. In order for a tool to be quote-unquote good, it should do something different than what other tools offer, or at least propose a different approach to doing it. There's a reason why items like the gravity gun or many of ULTRAKILL's alternate weapons, or why unorthodox characters in fighting games stand out just from a first glance. These shake up the game's mechanics and how you interact with the game. But that's not to say that the niche a tool has always has to be something crazy and super out there though. Sometimes, small differences are all that's needed. Let's take a look at CSGO's M4A1S and M4A4 for example. These two weapons have the near exact same stats, and both weapons can be swapped out for each other, leaving it up to preference. However, they have some key differences that allow for justification for choosing one above another, depending on what you like more. The M4A4 focuses on more consistent damage and spraying down your opponents, while the M4A1S focuses on being sneaky, taking out enemies one by one, and it's also a lot more accessible due to the lower price tag in the in-game shop. Both weapons offer similar but slightly different playstyles. You can even double down to smaller and smaller niches by allowing for mechanical customization, like take weapon mods for example. Or for one of my favorite examples, Pokemon. Each Pokemon can be customized from moveset to nature, ability, EVs, and IVs. Even in the highest level competitively, where oftentimes people mistake it for having a massive homogeneity problem due to a relatively small variety of Pokemon being used, there's actually depth in how you build every Pokemon. One person might use Dondozo for a tank while another may use them as a sweeper, for example. It depends on the Pokemon and how Game Freak treats them, but more often than not, there's usually a couple of things a Pokemon can do theoretically just by itself. As for what I would personally avoid, however, direct upgrades. I mean more like finding an item that's just a straight upgrade to what you previously had. Now, let me be clear, direct upgrades aren't bad. They're just boring. Well, at least I think it's boring. I know that the whole upgrading numbers, leveling up, and getting a better tier of gears is a hallmark for many game genres, but it serves the game's progression more than it does the arsenal. And right now, we're talking about the arsenal. Specifically, the arsenal's variety. Give the player items who can do something weird. An item that has elemental properties. An item that can synergize with other items. Things that make your players really think about picking up the +1 weapon they just got. Either way, this may be an easy box to check in a lot of cases, but it's also one of the most important to keeping the game fresh, and it must not be overlooked. Now, let's look at the interactions. While a good concept is what makes an item interesting, how it interacts with the rest of the game is arguably a little more important, as it needs something to necessitate its existence. In short, this is the part where you have to tackle the game's general balance, which is a vague idea in of itself, but you get the general gist of it, right? Every game's balanced state is different, and some games might not want anything near a balanced state, in the traditional terms. Just a state that lets many of its tools shine bright enough for them to stick with the player. But it's also important to keep one tool from outshining the others. This is the problem that most games face. Each tool must have their own situations where it outshines others, but that shouldn't be every time. There are some ways to balance an item that is otherwise overpowered, like making it rare for example. But that often introduces a new problem where the player is too conservative to use the item. Let's take Half-Life's revolver for example. It's a great and powerful weapon, but you barely have any ammunition, making it feel much more impactful and desperate. But that also means the player is very likely to hoard ammo for it for most of the game, despite it being way more available than it appears to be, which is a real shame. And then there's the opposite side of the spectrum of this problem in the same game, which is the default pistol. It's our handgun you'd use out of desperation, but there's just one problem. It shares ammo with the SMG, making it inferior to the SMG and revolver in every way. It sharing ammo with the SMG makes it so that situations where you'd be using the pistol over the SMGs are practically non-existent, since you won't have any ammo for the pistol in the first place. And even if you're not totally out of ammo, you'll probably be better off using the revolver instead to get yourself out of desperate situations much quicker, as it packs more of a punch. In Counter-Strike's case, it balances its weapons around its in-game economy. The AWP, or the AWP, is the scariest and most dominant weapon in the game. It's a sniper that, in most cases, kills in one hit. Simple, but very effective. However, it's held back by the fact that the AWP is one of the most expensive weapons in the game. On top of that, if you die with the AWP, it gives the enemy a chance to steal it and exploit it themselves. Another way to balance the arsenal is to design the game around it, so that each weapon has their own time to shine. Let's take Doom Eternal for example. It's a game almost entirely about hard counters and weak spots. The tools it offers you are all unique in their own ways, and in most cases they offer a great variety in how you approach a horde of enemies. It changes, however, upon dealing with the special enemies. You often switch weapons in the game not out of expression but out of near necessity. This game is filled with very specific hard counters you must go with, unless you want to waste a lot of time dealing with something ineffectively. It turns practically almost all of its encounters into this complex game of rock, paper, scissors as you target an enemy, plot your kryptonite against that enemy, target another enemy, and then repeat. And the last one I'm going to talk about is the more common one you'll see. This can vary from changing the stats of a weapon all the way to redesigning it. Things that you usually see in patch notes nowadays. Introducing Entropy 02, a Half-Life 2 mod. While Half-Life 2 technically fixed the pistol problem I mentioned earlier, this mod solution is arguably a little more interesting. First, pistol ammo is infinite and regenerates, so the weapon can always serve as your final option. 2. It gives the pistol a unique secondary fire that's actually a lot more powerful than you'd think. This ensures that the pistol is not only the best at its job as a reliable final option, but also has a unique quirk. Balancing how the arsenal interacts with everything else in the game is undoubtedly the most time-consuming part of getting an arsenal right, as it requires constant testing, re-evaluation, new eyes, and it only balloons further when you have a large arsenal. This is a whole rabbit hole in of itself, so I'll be moving on for now. Lastly, we have the finishing touches, the presentation. But that's not to say that this is the part where you can cut corners. Quite the opposite actually, as this can usually make or break your arsenal. Your tool needs to cater in every way to its concept and also to someone who would be using it. The sound it makes, the way it looks, the way it feels to use in general is very important. This is a very subjective topic, yes, but it's still an important box to check, you know. This can especially be important for side grades and identical tools, often making or breaking either item's popularity in the player base. Let's take another look at CSGO. This time I'm going to be looking at the P2000. Like in the case of the A4 and A1S, as I covered earlier, the P2000 and USP-S has a similar competition. And in fact, both are even more similar in terms of stats than the last two weapons are. But the USP-S is more popular. A lot of people assume that this is due to the P2000's bland look and more than lackluster sound design. Another case of this can be found within Wolfenstein enemy territory, specifically the Thompson and the MP40. People Make Games made a great video on it if you want some more on this very specific case study. All in all, presentation is sort of the deal maker or the deal breaker when it comes to a tool. Some people might avoid them just because of how they look, sound, and feel. It's an aspect you might, but shouldn't forget about. So, make tools unique by giving them a special role to fill. Playtest them into oblivion to make sure that they all have their times to shine, and present them as they deserve. Achieving 1 makes for a decent arsenal, 2 makes for a good arsenal, and achieving all 3 makes for a great arsenal. Seems simple, but that's because this is the very, very basics of it. Making a game's arsenal, of course, still has a lot more nuance than what I'm capable of covering in this one video, with many asterisks, ifs, buts, and it depends, and this is only looking at it in a vacuum. However, I believe these 3 components make for a good foundation for one to start with. Of course, feel free to add to the discussion in the comments, because I know there's a lot of stuff I didn't cover, either because they couldn't fit in anywhere, or because I just didn't know, or I just forgot, or I just didn't know what to say about it. Oh, and before I leave, I want to announce a little change in the channel real quick. I've been doing these videos on a monthly basis because I want to push myself to make a lot of videos, but also give myself a lot of time where I'm comfortable with working on one. But now I feel like I want to try and up the quality and scale of these videos, so I want you guys to expect less in quantity from this point on. Well, as if it wasn't already bad enough, I work on these videos solo, everything from writing to editing and then illustrating. And while keeping that, I want to up the quality of these videos, because I know I can, but I'm also working on several other projects, one of which is a fan game, which is undoubtedly my current biggest project yet. And I still regularly do art and music, so my time is spread pretty thin between all these things. So yeah, just a heads up that there's not gonna be much videos from this point on, but I'm gonna try my best and make them higher quality than this or my previous videos. But yeah, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video, whenever that is.